You have to manage across languages, different type of regulations in different countries. This is allowed here but not allowed there. And it was all very exciting. And I found it to be quite rewarding. It involved a lot of travel, but it also enabled me to learn a lot more about our Caribbean neighbors.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the fifth in our series of executive interviews for our Transformational Leadership series on Conversations with Colette on YouTube. The objectives of this interview series are as follows: to provide a documented account of how great leaders have achieved success, particularly in the Caribbean, and to provide a leadership blueprint through a form of indirect mentorship for the development of current and future generations of leaders. Today, it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce Mr. Lawrence McNaughton. Mr. McNaughton retired in April 2019 after serving 4 years as General Manager for Sol EC Limited St. Lucia, having returned the full-service petroleum marketing company to profitability after 18 months. His substantive career was with Cable and Wireless Caribbean, where he spent 35 years, joining the then Jamaica Telephone Co in 1980 as a technician. He went on to hold various senior management positions over his tenure, the most recent being Managing Director Outsourcing from 2012 to 2014, Managing Director Windward Islands, BVI and St. Kitts and Nevis from 2010 to 2012. Prior to this, he was Executive Vice President Carrier Services Caribbean from 2003 to 2010, where he managed the transition from monopoly to competition across the Caribbean. Previous positions held include VP Marketing, C&W Jamaica, and Head of Cellular Services, C&W Jamaica. Mr. McNaughton is a proud alumnus of the Cornwall College and the College of Art, Science and Technology, now the University of Technology Jamaica. He holds a bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, and a master's degree in electrical engineering, both from Howard University in Washington, D.C. He also holds a postgraduate diploma in management from Henley Management College in the UK. He further achieved the status of an accredited director in 2009 from the Canadian Institute. Mr. McNaughton has served as board director for C&W St. Kitts and Nevis, C&W Dominica, C&W Grenada, and C&W St. Lucia. He was also board chairman for C&W St. Kitts and Nevis from 2008 to 2014. Mr. McNaughton also sat on the board of Canto, the Caribbean Communication Umbrella Organization from 2010 to 2014. He was a member of the Government of Jamaica's Task Force on Information and Communication Technology, ICT, for its 2030 vision. It is my pleasure to introduce and welcome Mr. Lawrence McNaughton. Good morning, Mr. McNaughton.
Well, good morning, Miss Smith. How do you do? May I say Dr. Smith?
Mrs. Fine, Colette is fine.
I like saying that. And I'm so proud of what you have achieved for yourself. And certainly it's a very good example for women generally and for all of us in terms of somebody who is so focused on higher education and the way in which you have pursued this. It's really very exemplary.
Thank you very much, sir. To God be the glory. So, Mr. McNaughton, we have this series of interviews, as you know. The aim of the series is really to provide a blueprint for current and future leaders. We want persons to aspire to become the best that they can be, as Maslow has outlined in his hierarchy of needs, that we have basic physiological needs, and all of us at some point in time want to self-actualize. So we're going to be having a conversation with you this morning to share with the world about how they too can achieve greatness in their own area of interest. So my first question to you, Mr. Mack, in this 7-segment interview is, please tell us a little bit of your life story from boyhood throughout your professional life to where you are today.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity. I was born in Montego Bay at 13 and a half Upper King Street, what people call these days as an inner city community. Back then, it was, we saw that this was home. And we lived in what is a tenement yard with about maybe 6 or 7 other families. And what I do remember, I mean, we left there, my family left there, I mean, mother, father, and 3 siblings, so 4 of us. We left there when I was about 3 years old. I went to Glendevon. But just going back to King Street and what happened there in that tenement yard, what we had was a group of very industrious people, including my parents, very exemplary. Everybody worked, everybody sought to work. And what I learned subsequently from my parents and from my elder siblings, my 2 sisters, was that every single family in that yard went on to own their own home. Wow. Everybody was being, upwardly mobile. Everybody had a focus. Everybody concentrated on a job. Everybody went and moved ahead in terms of what they did for their families and certainly for their children. My parents were no different. My parents, throughout their entire lives, or their career anyway, both were hotel workers. My father, a waiter at a hotel in Montego Bay, Montego Beach Hotel, then he went to Sandals. My mother, pretty much my entire life, she worked at Half Moon Hotel as a chambermaid. Now, you will come to a section where you speak to about mentorship and so on. I mean, these were my best and earliest mentors, because what I saw then was people who were very industrious, people who were focused on a plan for their own lives with very little means, very little background in terms of education to stand on, but they had 4 children. And they were committed to doing the best they could with the jobs they had to ensure that we had a very good life. And in fact, they did. So that was my first experience then. None of us, as I mentioned, we went on from King Street, went to live in Glendevon for about 5 years in Montego Bay, and then we went to our own house in Mount Salem in 1967. And as I said, I mean, it was a really good childhood. My parents, looking back, I realized how much they sacrificed for themselves to ensure that the 4 of us had the best they could afford in terms of our clothing, food, education, and not just that, but love. We had a lot of love. I mean, all of us, when we speak to each other, we said, we didn't realize how, one could say, poor we were at the time. How we had a lot of love, and we felt we had all our basic needs covered. And we all knew that we lived within certain boundaries, and we were happy within those boundaries economically that our parents could afford. And it was really a good life, lots of love. We had an extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, well, paternal grandparents anyway. My mother's grandparents had, her father died, and her mother moved to Cuba from earlier on. So it was pretty good. There was a focus on education, what they didn't have. I mean, they both would have gone on to, I think they would have called it first and second book at the time. But my father, he left school at 12, working in the sugar industry out at Ironshore in St. James. And that was it. But my father has educated himself so well, and both parents were able to educate us with the little that they knew, and more so to inculcate education as very important in our own lives. So notwithstanding the fact that they couldn't, certainly beyond, once we got into high school, they couldn't help us much with homework anymore. But they saw to it that we did our homework, that we were fed, and we were properly clothed, and that they followed up to see that we were in fact doing well in school by visiting our teachers, asking questions, how are we doing, and so on and so forth. Wonderful. I remember having a discussion with my father earlier on. I admired him quite a bit. I mean, he was a male figure in the family. Certainly admired my mom too. But looking at him and to see what it is I want to become. And I told him that I wanted to be exactly like him. I wanted to have 4 children, a wife, of course, and I wanted to be a waiter. Yes. That's when he said, no, you don't want to be a waiter. I am only a waiter because I can't do any better. But I so admired him, the way in which he did his job. The same thing with my mother. They were always punctual, they went to work, and both of them prided themselves at being good at what they did. So my mother is a chambermaid. She felt that she kept saying that she was the best chambermaid at her home. My father was a waiter. He figured he was the best waiter there. In fact, he was promoted eventually to captain / maitre d'. So, they did the best they could with what they had. And I think we all benefited from that. So I went to high school, as you mentioned, at Cornwall College. And that was quite an achievement for me and for my family, and certainly for my father and my mother. No, my two sisters would have also gone to high school. So here it is that their children, all four of us, went on to high school, something that they could only dream of. So, and it was up to us to do the best we could at high school, and they saw to that. I still remember my father supporting me in every sphere of high school, again, in terms of sports. He ensured that I wanted a football boots. Okay, so I wanted to play for the school's junior team. He bought me a football boots. I mean, I realized later that this was a tremendous sacrifice. And my mother was doing the same thing for the girls, because she would have worked closer with them in terms of the things that girls do.
Yes.
And I love cricket. And again, my father ensured that I was properly outfitted in my whites. And I still remember this day when I was in fourth form at the time, playing for Cornwall senior team, Medley Cup team, playing against Manning School. Manning's from Westmoreland. But the match was at out in Rosal. And I still remember my father driving up to the field, parking his car, crossing his arms and just watching. I went out to bat, and I tell you, they couldn't get me out that day. Wow. My dad was watching.
And the support you can't allow him to be embarrassed.
Yes, that support, it was just tremendous, and I felt so good to have my dad there watching me playing cricket for my school. Wow. After Cornwall, I was fortunate to go on to UTech, as you mentioned, to do electrical engineering. I had a toss-up between what do I want to do in terms of my career. Now again, my father, I remember him sitting with me when I was in third form. This would have been about 1974, 75, 74 actually, 73, 74. Around our kitchen table, and I was talking about my career. What do you want to do? No, I remember my grandmother, his mother, wanted me to be a doctor, because she so admired Dr. Morrison, who was a prominent doctor in Montego Bay. And somehow she saw me as, her grandson to become another Dr. Morrison. I wasn't too keen on being a doctor. And so I was at a dilemma. And, somehow my father said, why don't you be an engineer? I'm not sure my father knew at that point what an engineer is. But somehow he came onto that, and I guess based on the subjects that I liked. And I chose then, in third form, that I'm going to be an engineer. So when I went to fourth form and chose my subjects, I chose them along the lines of what an engineer would do. And it has worked out well for me. So thanks to him and thanks to my mom for all the support with that is concerned. So I went to CAST, which is now UTech, and did my electrical engineering diploma. And I remember my mother being the one coming to my graduation in Kingston. At this time, I'm in Kingston, and I would have moved to live. My first year, I was living with my sister, my eldest sister, who had moved to Kingston earlier. And she was very supportive. So she was my mother in Kingston. And it was a wonderful experience. I remember when I was going off, my mother, in terms of handing me over to her, said, she called me Masalar. So she said, make sure you take care of Masalar. And, she knew that I ate well. I had a very, very good appetite. And she was proud of that, So my sister told her that she was not into cooking any bananas, green bananas, every morning. So my mother said, no, he's not the banana one. The banana one is my younger brother, Carlton. He likes his bread, so he's okay with bread and whatever else he thinks, so he's fine. Yes. So all went well. And, I left CAST. And having left CAST, I went back to Montego Bay and got a job with the then Jamaica Telephone Company as a technician. And I guess we'll go more into career and what happened thereafter. I was there for about 4 or 5 years. When I applied for a scholarship, went to Howard University, got my degrees there. I got a scholarship, which was, study leave with pay. So the company was very good to me. So I completed my bachelor's degree at Howard. And on doing that, the university then offered me a scholarship to do a master's and a PhD. So I came back to Jamaica, met with the then head of training, who was Errol Miller, who would later become the president. And we agreed that I would go on to do the master's. No, this was being paid for by the university. So I was now on study leave without pay. So I spent another year and a half did my master's in engineering, came back and was posted in Kingston. So that would have been 1989. I'm living in Kingston, and I went on from there into various jobs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Mark. Thank you so much for sharing that. So from humble beginnings,
yes,
all the way up to becoming an engineer and completing your master's at the great Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Today, Mr. Mack, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about a few of the major academic, social, professional, or other challenges you're faced, because although you've outlined your experience so beautifully, I'm sure that at some point in time you would have faced some challenges. So I would like for you at this time to share with us some of those challenges and how did you overcome those challenges?
Okay. Well, I think the first one, major challenge I had would have been at Cornwall, if I remember correctly. Just a situation where I was sort of going off the path that I should have been on. I became a little bit turbulent. I guess I was 14, 15 years old, and became a bit boisterous and was less focused on my schoolwork. And I remember, thank God for headmasters like one we had, Mr. Crick. At the time we all felt he was such an awful person because he was so strict. And now, our class, I have a very active class group, Cornwall College class of 76, and every single one of us now look back at those days and say, we are the best headmasters. I remember in third form, he would, routinely go through, we had what we call 5-week exams. And after these exams, we looked through, and this was in third form. And he would call me into his office, amongst others, but in terms of my one-on-one with headmaster, he looked at my grades, saw that I was slipping, and gave me a very stern warning. And he said to me that boys like myself will go on to pass little or no subjects, and would then seek to come back begging to be readmitted to school to repeat my O-levels. And that resonated with me in a very big way. And I said, I don't want to be that type of person. Because he looked at my grades and that's where I was heading. I'm happy to say that the following year, so I took stock of that. And I really took it on myself to say, I'm going to do some serious work. So I got to fourth form, and this is the following year, similar interview with headmaster. And he was able to predict, based on how I was doing in fourth form, early fourth form, he told me that I would have passed all my 8 subjects and I would have gotten 3 distinctions.
Woo!
He told me that.
Wonderful.
I beat him by 1. Yes. So I got 4 distinctions. But the point is that he was so, he was so attuned to what I was doing. And I guess it all comes down to, adults, they have been there, they know what you're doing, they know what trajectory you're on in terms of how you're performing now. And he was able to predict, and not only the number of subjects, but the distinctions within one, as I mentioned. So, to him.
Wonderful.
And I pretty much, after that, I became quite a focused student throughout.
Yes.
Throughout the rest of Cornwall, and then when I went to CAST, same thing. I maintained that focus, and that served me throughout when I left, went to Howard University, got my first degree. As you might have mentioned, I was able to graduate summa cum laude, which in US parlance is a first class honors, or it means with highest praise.
Yes.
So back then, we had a joke at Howard that says, you had summa cum laude, you had magna cum laude, and you had cum laude, which is highest praise, high praise, with praise. That's the 3. And then for those who just pass, they call it thank you, Lordy. So, thank you, Lordy.
Yes.
Cum laude, magna cum laude, and summa cum laude. Yeah, but what was a good experience? Let me mention that I was fortunate to have gone to this university because at the time we had a very high proportion of Caribbean students, and it was actually my first, traveling to the United States was my first trip. And it was my first time, funny enough, interacting with other Caribbean nationals. So we are so near here. But up to then, I had never met and interacted with another Caribbean national. So here I was in a university filled with Caribbean nationals. At the time, if I recall correctly, we had no less than about 100 Jamaicans enrolled. 300 Jamaicans enrolled, but about well over 400 Trinidadians, and maybe about 100 Barbadians, and then you had others from Antigua, St. Lucia, and so on. With a whole lot of Africans, especially from Nigeria and Ghana. So it was quite a cosmopolitan campus. And you learned, so apart from your lessons, you learned a lot about the international world in which you live, about other countries, certainly the Caribbean. I was a member of the Caribbean Student Association, so again, I gelled very closely with my Caribbean counterparts. And our monthly fits and stuff like that was always quite a competition between reggae and calypso. Trinidadians outnumbered us in terms of number, but we sort of we're a bit more certain somehow.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we probably had our way. So we had more reggae playing than calypso. But it was all good. It was all friendly. Yeah. And I really enjoyed Howard. Yeah. So when I left Howard after completing my master's, came back to Jamaica and met with a few managers to decide where I was to be posted. So I was posted in Kingston, and it was a very good experience. Now, having done that, and then I progressed to I know that this will be a subject of another question, but in 1991, I was promoted to head of cellular services. And concomitant with that, Mr. Errol Miller at the time decided that, my studies up to then was engineering, core engineering. And he decided that with this job, up then I had purely engineering based job, he felt that I need to understand a bit more of the commercial aspects of life and the company. So he enrolled me at Henley to do my postgraduate diploma in management. So that again, I was very appreciative of it. I did about 3-4 residentials where I went away to the UK. In fact, one residential was done in Hong Kong. It should have been in 1996. Yes. And very, very useful. And I think I benefited tremendously from that.
Wonderful. And having benefited from your expertise in management, I'm sure that was a very, very effective strategy in terms of your development. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mark. So my third question to you, Mr. Mark, and this leads nicely from what you've just shared with us. Many leaders have identified the persons who have mentored them directly or indirectly throughout their careers. Can you identify anyone who contributed significantly to your success or influenced you to strive for excellence? How did they influence you? And before you respond, I just want to say thank you for being an awesome mentor for me.
Thank you very much. I feel privileged.
Thank you.
Looking at what you've achieved now, I feel well. Those of us who get mentioned in terms of being of influence with your career, I think we're all feeling proud. Thank you.
God bless you.
Yeah. So I did mention my parents, right?
Yes.
In terms of those who mentored me, those who influenced me, my mother and father were very, very, very good at that. What happened later on when I left UTech cast, I recall Mr. Trevor Dixon, who worked at the telephone company at that time. We attended the same church at Emmanuel Chapel in Montego Bay. And this is a whole other phase of my life that I didn't mention, because I had a very active life at Emmanuel Chapel in Montreal and Montego Bay, playing football, being part of the youth group, youth fellowship, and it molded me quite a lot. In fact, I was very shy in terms of public speaking and so on, and I think whatever skills I honed in terms of being able to articulate publicly would have been learned at Emmanuel Chapel at my church in Montego Bay. So I mentioned that Mr. Trevor Dixon was an elder there, and he worked with the Jamaica Telephone Co. So he gave me some introduction to Mr. Martin Hamilton, who had a job vacancy when I left cast. Well, the vacancy that Mr. Hamilton had, Mr. Hamilton at the time was the manager in Montego Bay for what was called network maintenance. So Mr. Hamilton, I had a cast diploma then, and the job he had was a job for a trainee technician. So pretty much the job was more for somebody who was fresh out of high school, not somebody coming out of college. And I said, well, I'll take it, because I saw the Jamaica Telephone Company as a good company to get a foothold in. And so they said yes, but funny thing is that coming in or going into Jamaica Telephone Company as a somebody out of high school, you'd have gotten a trainee technician job. But notwithstanding the fact that they never had a vacancy for somebody at my level, they somehow created one. And I got in as just below the level of a senior technician, what we call a leading technician there. So I was not employed as a trainee technician, although at the time they felt that that's what they had. But Mr. Hamilton had enough foresight to see that, well, he wanted someone like me because he saw where I could fill his management ranks in the not too distant future. Yes. And so said, so done. After about a year, 2 years, a year as a technician, leading technician, I was promoted to senior technician. And within a year of that, I was promoted to a junior executive and placed in another section. So I was in what we call the tool or radio maintenance section, tool transmission section of the network maintenance department. Again, thanks to Mr. Hamilton. Yes. So I spent about, so I was now a supervisor. I was now in management. And so I continued there, continued to do my best, tried to learn everything that I could learn. I remember people reacting to me when I just joined the company. And I remember a young man saying to me at the time, when I just joined, and I mean, this was a very technical environment. And I guess people test you. So he asked me a question about something, and I say, well, I don't know, I'm just coming from university, from UTech. And he said, well, no, we know you didn't work here before, but you know have the background, and we expect you to learn faster than everybody else. So I took that very seriously, and went into the office on a Saturday and a Sunday sometimes, outside of church hours, and just ensured that I took in all the information I could, reading the circuit descriptions, reading what you call then trying the operating procedures and so on, so that I could accelerate my own learning within this technical environment to justify my position. Because so I
took on the challenge.
Yes. So then came 1985, at which point I'm in telephone company 4.5, going 5 years. And I decided that was always a part of my plan. I don't have a first degree. And I'm about 25 years old, I want to have a first degree. And the good thing was that a lot of my batchmates at UTech class at the time, a number of them had gone on to Howard University. So I had a few friends there that I was in contact with, and I decided that this is the route I wanted to go. And so I applied, got through, and then sought Mr. Hamilton's support for scholarship to go to the US. At the time, the company had some bad experiences with previous employees who were given scholarship to go to the US. A lot of them never came return. So the company had actually implemented a policy to say, we are no longer sending people to the US because there's too much of a risk of them not coming back. So Mr. Hamilton decided to make an exception for me. And by then, I would have met and spoken to Mr. Hugh Cross, who was Mr. Hamilton's boss. Yes. But he was based in Kingston. Yes. And so I needed the support of them both. And they both supported me. And so next thing I know, my scholarship came through. And I remember the last thing Mr. Cross said to me before I went off to Washington. He said, Mark, make sure you come back, Because he had put his neck on the block to vouch from me that I was going to go away and come back. And, I'm proud to say it. So thanks to, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Cross for supporting me there. And Mr. Cross, when I came back from the US, when I finished my studies, I ended up working in his department in Kingston. And up to this day, I will say that the best job I've had was to come in 1991 when I was appointed head of department for cellular services, reporting to Mr. Cross. Yes. And I keep telling him that this is the best job. I mean, I went on to much higher jobs, much more rewarding jobs from a monetary standpoint, and rewarding otherwise, but this remains the best job I've ever had. Yes. I remember not liking weekends, couldn't wait for Mondays to come. I was in the office all the time, working with a fantastic bunch of people, and you know a few of them. Yes. And I think so. Kudos to Mr. Cross. By the way, Mr. Cross has been issued OD, Order of Distinction.
Wonderful.
Yes. And when I called him a couple of weeks ago to congratulate him, he said to me, Mark, remember that you had a lot to do with this, because he got it for telecoms. He said, remember that you had a lot to do with this award that I'm getting, so thank you. I feel good about that.
Wonderful.
But so Mr. Cross was a tremendous mentor. And then Mr. Errol Miller, let me not forget him. By this time, Mr. Miller was president of the company. By the time I got back, but when I was negotiating for this scholarship from the university, he was then training manager. But by the time I got back, went through cellular, he was the one who appointed me into regional management. So I went from being focused on Jamaica into what was then carrier services and took on our regional sphere. And as I mentioned, he was the one who also decided that I needed to move on and study management. And so Errol Miller, Hugh Cross, Martin Hamilton, Trevor Dixon, and of course my parents, I would list them as the ones who would have had the most influence on my career.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Mark. This takes us nicely into segment 4, the path to success. What were your main strategies to achieve success? We are speaking, as you know, to current and future managers, persons who would have faced some of the challenges that you have outlined, persons who perhaps would have been mentored directly or indirectly by different persons in their lives.
I got a very good foundation from my parents, let me say that. So I learned that to achieve, you need to be focused and you need to give a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. I saw that in my parents. They had lowly jobs, one could say, as a waiter, but they took this on, they embraced it. It was their job. And they tried and they made the best of it and ensured that they did the best they could at those jobs because they had children to feed, children to clothe, children to send to school. But I saw them, at no time did I see them or hear them disparage their job. My mother, she considered herself the best maid, as I mentioned, my father, this waiter, and they took these jobs very seriously. So that was a good start. My first month at the Jamaica Telephone Company, something happened. I was a technician then, and we pretty much automatically joined the union. And this is not to disparage union, this was just something about what the union head at the time said, and I won't name the union. So we were at a union meeting, and the discussion was along the line of what the union could do for you, including if you get into trouble. And the union head who was addressing us at the time said something along the lines of, if you get into trouble, we'll defend you. And, so this was my first work experience, really. This was my first time in the union, and I'm amongst a group, this was in Montego Bay, and I'm in a group of no less than 100 plus people. And I put my hand up and I say, well, what did you just say? And it was not just having said it, but the tone in which he said it, I told him my interpretation of it was that you sound as if you're encouraging us to get into trouble. And that we should be free to get into trouble because you're going to defend us. Yes. And I don't think that's right. That's right. You should be telling us not to get into trouble, to do our jobs, and so on and so forth. And because I said that to say this because unfortunately, whatever was meant by what he said, there were those who took it at face value. Yes. And in some instances, not because he said it, but maybe that's just where they were. They felt that they were in a union environment, and therefore it gave them the right to slack off, not try as hard as they needed to, but just to get by. And I realized that I was never satisfied with just getting by. I should give a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. This is what the company employed me to do, and I'm not about to get into trouble. That's not what I'm seeking, and I'm going to stay away from that as best as possible, and I'm going to work hard as I can. Now, the other thing I would say to everyone else is that at this point I'm 21 years old. I just turned 21. What I'll say to everyone, entering the workplace, whether you're just entering or whether you're a 20-year veteran, is that you must take responsibility for yourself. You must. Do not rely on others to motivate you It's good if they do. And as a manager, I certainly try to do that. But you must take responsibility for yourself, because at the end of it all, you have, your family to feed, whether you have a wife, children, or a husband, your parents, aging parents, and you would like to take care of them as best as you can. You would like to ensure that your parents, your aging parents, have the best medical facility available to them. You'd like to ensure that your children have the best education opportunities available to them. You'd like to know that they are properly housed, properly clothed, and that they are properly entertained to the extent that you want to send them, give them vacation and so on. In other words, you want to know that you are able to best support your family and yourself as you can. And it is called comfort to get to a point in your career, not having any significant progress, being stagnant, and then blame someone else, because that's called comfort. Blaming someone else doesn't put food on the table, it doesn't educate your children. So you need to take this on and to motivate yourself, set your own goals and work towards them. It is very, very important. And if you find yourself in an environment where, having done all of this, you are not able to make progress, find a way to leave. You're a good example. Whether or not you were making progress on it, but you still chose to look at me. Part of my goal is that I need to get my first, my second, my PhD, and so on. So you have your own goals. Not everybody's going to go on to PhD. Not everybody needs to do that. But the point is, put yourself in the best position possible so that you can progress in the career of your choice. And if academia is not yours, and if it's a matter that you need to go and do training in terms of a particular trade and so on, then do that. Align yourself to someone who can assist you and read. These days, we are living in the information age and everything is available. There are things in my house that I could do, plumbing work, electrical work, and so on. Where now, it's just a YouTube away. But the point is, you can educate yourself in many fields. And I encourage people to do that and not sit back and wait on a mentor or a supervisor to clear the path for you. Try your best to forge it for yourself.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mark. That was so powerful that I really just want to reiterate the points. You're saying, in summary, be industrious.
Yes.
Give a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. Do your best at all times. Work with pride. Be intrinsically motivated. Be goal-focused. Yes. Read widely. And focus on personal development. Whether that be in academia or in learning a technical skill, utilize the resources that are available to become your best self. Thank you so much for those tips, Mr. McNaughton.
You have summarized it so well. And it's all about being professional, right? And some of the things that one would see on the fields of it is, you are supposed to attend a meeting. What time do you turn up? You're supposed to attend work. What time do you show up? You're attending a meeting. Are you prepared? Simple things. So be on time and be prepared.
Yes.
And be respectful of everyone.
Absolutely.
At their time and so on.
Excellent. When I'm doing time management sessions, I like to share with people that arriving on the time when the meeting is supposed to start, you're late. Being on time means that you're early, at least 5 to 15 minutes early. Wonderful. Mr. Mark, section 5 is where we're at. Executive coaching, metrics, and mentorship. What is your view of coaching and mentorship in 21st century organizations, especially given the demanding nature of executive responsibilities and the focus on using metrics, quantitative and qualitative targets to determine if executives and their teams are performing at the set or desired standard?
A very important question. So let me start off by saying, coming up, I did mention that I had some mentors that I do, I give every praise. But coming up at the time, there was no formal mentorship, so to speak. And today I'm seeing that. And certainly I was able to become a formal mentor. I remember up to when I just leaving Cleveland Wireless, I remember at the time I had at least 2 mentees who were formally assigned to me. They didn't work with me. They were in a totally different department. But the company had advanced to that stage where it says, we're going to have a mentorship program and this is what you do. And in one case, I remember the person who was assigned to me, the person sought me out and said they wanted me to be their mentor. And so we had scheduled meetings where we meet every 2 weeks. And at this stage, I was in St. Lucia. One was in Barbados, one was in Jamaica. But we utilized the technology that was available to us. And we would have these sessions, these mentorship sessions, where we talk through issues, challenges they were having, and I could give my advice and so on. And I felt I was learning from this. And it was so rewarding. So it's very, very good. It is something that I support, and I would certainly encourage managers to be a mentor. Even if you never had a mentor yourself, take on a mentee, because you're going to learn from it too. In fact, it keeps you in tune with what's happening, in the wider world. I mean, for the most part, you're going to be mentoring most likely somebody younger than yourself. It gives you an insight. It becomes a learning experience for you. And you get to appreciate how different things are even now versus when you were at that level or you were at that age. In terms of some of the scientific methods that are available, I would say utilize them as best as you possibly can. In some cases, you can go on the internet, you can find some of these things that can give you some self-assessment to see where you are and learn as much as you can from them. Now, the other thing is, as somebody, forging either a career, you need to be very open in terms of being able to accept criticism, whether it comes from your supervisor, a peer, or it comes from one of these tools that you may subscribe to. So it's very easy to say that's not me. It's very easy to say that you're wrong, I'm right. I remember having a young man reporting to me, and he had his department, and it was a fairly big department, and I had no less than 4 members of his department coming to me, his boss, to report an issue with him. And it was all very similar. And they were located in different areas where it became clear to me that they weren't necessarily speaking to each other. And the issues that they raised were real. And it pointed to a problem with him, their manager, who was a department head at the time. So I called him in and said, look, there's this issue, and I think you have a problem here and you need to work on it. You know what he said? He said to me, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I think something is wrong with all of them. So I'm speaking to an adult, I'm speaking to a senior manager, and I'm saying, well, okay, I need for you to think about it some more, because, if 4 persons are saying this, and what they are saying is very similar in terms of the traits that you display that are rubbing them the wrong way. We had one person actually coming to me crying. But to cut a long story short, in the end it worked out well, because he came back to me without any further prompting to say, I realize I'm wrong, and this is what I'm going to do to correct it. So he started out badly by saying, it's not me. But then he went and he corrected it, and he realized that something is wrong with how I'm handling my the people reporting to me, and this is how I'm going to do it. So there was a realization, and once you are able to look into yourself to see where you might have shortcomings, and we all have shortcomings,
Absolutely.
And we need to take this on. Something is said about you, sometimes it's not said in the best of ways, probably not said in the most constructive of ways. But whenever there's a criticism about you, think about it for a while.
Yes.
Is there any truth to it? Or can there be any truth to it? Let me check this out. Because there might be some truth to it, and it becomes an opportunity for me to improve myself.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it hurts, but take it on.
Very good. He had an epiphany that really saved the day, because he could have destroyed his team had he not taken the time to reflect.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yes. I don't know if you recall, periodically during the performance appraisal year, I would check in with you to find out how am I doing.
Yes.
Criticism. Sometimes you can invite criticism.
Yes.
You can ask your supervisor or your manager, how am I doing? So that you do not wait until it's performance appraisal time to get a score that you're disappointed in, but you can fix any issues that needs to be fixed before the day comes for you to be given your evaluation.
Yes. I'm glad you prompted that subject about performance appraisal and objectives, because that is key also. Very, very key. So you need to ensure that the people who are working with you, they have a job description, so at least they have a fair idea of what their job is. This is what my job is, and this is what I'm expected to do. In addition to that, you need to have formal objectives,
Yes.
written down, smart objectives that you can work towards achieving, right? So we're talking about specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, time-bound, smart objectives.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, it's also useful to have at least quarterly reviews. Because you're right, as a manager, the greatest joy is to write a good appraisal. You want to write only good appraisals, and it becomes very easy to write. It's very easy to sit down with a colleague and to do a good appraisal for them, and you both smile and everybody's happy. But you want to also be honest, right? And what you want to do is to ensure that this person is getting feedback, as you saw it back then, that you don't want to know that at the time, 12 months are up, and then you look back at 12 months and then you are surprised that something wasn't achieved, or there's a behavior that needed correction that you were not aware of. And it generally happens. You may well be going along your merry way, think that you're doing okay, and your manager is not satisfied with it. So that's where you have two-way dialogue, at least quarterly. You could do it more often if you wish, but at least quarterly, to say, these are your objectives and this is how you are performing against them, in my view. And the feedback is good too, because at that point, you get feedback from the person being appraised, because you also learn, because you the manager could also be off kilter. Yes. And you could also learn that, in fact, the way the person is doing it, and it may be a procedural problem that you are perceiving, and the appraisee is able to show you that, well, actually, this is how I do it, or this is how I think is actually a better way, and you might even be convinced. You might change the objective, but the dialogue is always good. But most importantly, you want to coach someone into a good appraisal, so that by the time 12 months are up, there are no surprises, and you're able to write a good appraisal. Or if the appraisal is bad, then there are still no surprises. The person would have been adequately warned, yes, and given enough time to correct what is perceived to be challenges or issues that needed to be corrected. So that is very, very important. And then, you might do a formal or written mid-year appraisal, and certainly at the end of the year, do a formal appraisal where everything is documented and everybody has their say in terms of being able to comment. In fact, what I say to my managers reporting into me is that this is one of your most important jobs, to ensure that the appraisal system is in place and that you follow through on it. It's an ongoing exercise of setting objectives, aligning them with the objectives of the organization and the job description, and to ensure that you follow through on a regular basis to ensure that your colleague is understanding where they are, how they are performing, and you want to coach them into doing an excellent job.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Mack. I hope that HR directors, senior managers, CEOs, and VPs will be watching this. And if this is not happening in their organization, they will begin to implement these strategies for success, even in a pandemic, particularly in a pandemic. This takes us nicely into leadership style, Mr. Mack. What specific strategies and leadership styles have you employed in managing people since your first leadership job?
I try to be very open. I try to provide as much information as possible. We mentioned about the job description and objectives. That's very critical to how I manage, because I want to manage against, set targets with a lot of flexibility. Anyway, I mean, let's overachieve the targets. That's fine, but we need to achieve these because these are the company's objectives, and we need to ensure that they are being achieved. So you have to know what it is that you're about. So I want to know that you are aware of why you're here, job description, and I want to know that you're aware of what is expected of you. And I want you to know that this is how what is expected of you is aligned with the broader objectives. And if you don't achieve your objective, this is how it affects somebody else. So we speak a lot about internal customers and external customers. And this is where I tend to try to focus a lot on internal customers. Because every one of us as employees in an organization, we depend on others within the organization to serve the eventual customer. Whether we provide input to them or whether they provide input to us. In which case you do have a customer relationship within the organization. And it is very important for me to be doing the things that I'm supposed to do to serve those who are trying to achieve their objectives. It's one of the things where I, as a senior manager, I always tell people that, I don't make widgets. I don't make things. I don't build bridges. I don't do many things. physical, tangible things. I make decisions. And I use information to make decisions.
Yes.
And therefore, I must be reading things that are sent to me. So we are in an email situation where you are no longer getting faxes, you get emails, and everybody has access to email. And sometimes you get more emails than you need to. Sometimes people get very email happy and they send you more than they should, and they can deal with that. But the fact of the matter is that information is coming into you.
Yes.
And I see this as a critical part of my job, that I take this information in promptly. So I have a rule that I set for myself, that no email goes unread within a day. So when I go to bed at night, all emails must have been read, and I'll respond to them all, because I see it as a critical part of my job, because that's how the information comes to me, and this is how I make decisions. Some of the emails are asking you to actually pointedly to make a decision because somebody needs to move on to something else. Some of the emails are asking you to review and approve something. Some of the emails are asking you to review a business case or a spreadsheet. You need to get back to people so that they can do their job. And I see that as very, very important. That why should a manager be sitting on something, not reviewing, not getting back to a colleague, causing them to be late with a deliverable that they have? It's very important to me that I not be the one to hold up a deliverable for somebody else, right? Because at that key, as much as I might be your manager, at that point you become my customer, because you are now dependent on me to provide an input so that you can complete a task or an assignment. So I find that very, very important. So I must be timely myself. I must set that example. Not just being punctual to meetings, but I must be very responsive. I cannot be the one to be responding to an email 2 days after the fact. Or a week, it just doesn't fly with me. You must, as best as possible, respond within the day, or at worst the next day within 24 hours of getting whatever it is that you got. And if you are not able to provide an answer, you should at least be able to say, I have received your request and I will get back to you at X time. Understanding that X time is consistent with the ultimate deliverable that company is putting in. So as a manager, you need to be exemplary. You need to be very, very responsive. And having done that, I do turn around and expect the same of those I'm working with. Not just the people reporting to me, but my peers. And I've also had opportunity is the right word, but I've also called to task my boss on 1 or 2 occasions to say, look, I've sent you this and you have not gotten back to me. And I expect that you actually get back to me because it is holding me up to do something else. And I think it actually shows respect to people. Why should someone send you a report? Somebody go through all of this, write a report, send it to you, and you don't even read it. You don't give them any feedback as far as they are concerned. And that's happened to me where I find out a month later that it wasn't read. So why am I doing this if you're not going to read it? And then you come and ask me questions. And at that point, I will say to you respectfully, it was in the report that I sent to you at X time. And I expect you to read it because it's not the best use of our time now. Because I took the time, wrote the report, you should have read it, and now you're now utilizing my time, your time, to go through something that you should have gone through sometime. And again, it speaks to respect. You need to respect everyone.
Yes,
and it starts with you respecting the people that work with you and work for you, however you term it, and to let them understand that their time is valuable and that you are responsive to their needs.
Wonderful. I'm listening to you, Mr. Mark, and governance is a part of management. It's just that they are managing the resources of the entire country. And as you speak and as I reflect on companies that have been successful, those that have failed, and those that have been mediocre, I'm thinking that if more managers were doing what you are doing, then we would have a more successful set of organizations within the country, and economic growth would have been way ahead in terms of the potential for the organization or the country. So I thank you very, very much for that. The importance of effective communication and proper management of time.
Okay, thank you. So we had discussed quite a bit about objectives and aligning objectives with corporate objectives and so on, and pretty much how much you try to get people to take responsibility and be open. You have to be so mindful of your audience and the people that you are managing, because from time to time you'll have to change. So I left a situation with Cable and Wireless where at the executive vice president level or managing director level, where I had people at vice president level reporting to me. With that, you expect to give just broad objectives, and people will go ahead and get things done. And by and large, that was true. It became easier, and then you are left to do more strategic planning and so on. After I retired the first time, and then I went back to Seoul to work, I realized I had to change because I had to be a lot more hands-on, because I was dealing with people at different levels of the organization, and certainly not people as senior as where I was coming from at Cable and Wireless. So I realized that I had to adapt, and just giving broad objectives was not sufficient. You had to become a little more granular, and you had to, in some instances, to be a lot hands-on. Whereas with more senior people, they would actually resent this. So I found myself in a situation where I had to do that. People are less empowered, so you have to find a way, how do I empower these folks so that they can take on a bit more than they are taking on. So I give you an example. I went on business to Guyana. Left St. Lucia, went on business to Guyana, and I got a call. And what was the call about? A workman was in the warehouse doing a job, and whatever he was doing was causing fumes to blow back into the AC system and was impacting the staff in the office. And the call I got was pretty much that somebody needed to tell the workmen to stop. And nobody took it upon themselves or felt empowered enough to tell the workmen, please stop because you're harming us and you're causing fumes to blow back into the office. I had to then ask the person who called me to please pass the phone to the workmen. And even then, there was a problem because she didn't want to get too close to where the workmen are. But number one felt empowered enough to tell the workmen to stop, to stop poisoning them.
Yes. Oh my God.
And you have to call me in Guyana to do that.
Yes.
But it just gives you an idea of people you may be working with, who you may take something for granted, that a situation, because I wouldn't say it was immediately life and death, but it was certainly something that was impacting their health immediately. And no one felt empowered enough to tell the workmen to stop. And they had to call me in Guyana to tell the workmen to stop. So, it's very important that people understand their empowerment. I mean, certainly there are some things that they can't authorize, but you would have thought that something like that, they'd have taken it upon themselves.
Yes, take the initiative. Yes.
So you have to be willing to adapt and change your style as necessary, depending on those that you are managing.
Thank you so much. So you've got to know your people, know their capabilities, know the nuances of the people, and ensure that your management style matches that. There's a common thread between transformational and transactional leadership. Transactional leadership, it is said, is a style that focuses on rewards and sanctions to influence performance. The transformational leader is said to be that leader that is able to have a vision for himself, for the organization, for the team, and to be able to sell the vision and manage the human resources in such a way that team members are not only able to achieve the goals, but very often are able to surprise themselves and go beyond what is required of them to achieve even greater goals. Based on what you have done at Cable and Wireless and at Seoul Petroleum, based on what you went and saw, and based on the transformation of the different organizations you've managed, it appears to me that what you have been is a transformational leader.
I agree that I've done a bit of that, but it's also true that from time to time you have had to do the transactional stuff. But certainly, overall, you want to be a transformational leader. I will just tell you, in terms of the advice I give to my nieces, I have quite a few nieces and nephews. And the same advice I give to people coming into our workplace. You have a job to do, right? So you do that. You are given some tasks to do, you do that. But at all times, try to go beyond that. In other words, if you have a job, it is up to you to, the term I use is to fill out that job and to go beyond. In other words, you want to make yourself as indispensable as possible.
Awesome.
So that if it comes to a point where the company needs to get rid of some jobs, yours is the last one they want to think of, because the job that was given to you, you have made that job so much bigger that they are now looking at it as, you are now becoming as indispensable as possible.
Wonderful.
If you are given a report, if you are asked to do a simple report that involves, a few lines, put a graph on it.
Yes.
Do something else. Do some value add, Find some other things that you might want, because the fact of the matter is that you will have time to do it. So make yourself as indispensable as possible and outgrow that job.
Thank you so much for sharing those recommendations, Mr. McNaughton. Thank you so very much. Be an asset.
Yes.
Indispensable asset. Wonderful.
That's it.
This takes us into segment 7. Can you believe we're in the final segment, Mr.
There we go.
Summary of experiences and advice for today's leaders. This segment seeks to summarize your experience in life and leadership. What would you say, Mr. McNaughton, were the high points in your career? What advice would you give to aspiring and current leaders who desire to become transformational leaders or role models or mentors in their own rights?
Okay. I will start with that last point, because I remember when I left Cape Wireless in 2014, and I told everybody I retired. So, and by then I would have spent my last 4 years working in the Eastern Caribbean, being away from Jamaica. And then the opportunity came up to go to Saul, and I decided to go back to the Eastern Caribbean, because I felt that from a transformational standpoint, there was a bit more that I could impart to my colleagues in the Eastern Caribbean, because I've now seen myself as a Caribbean person, a Caribbean citizen. And I felt that there are certain pockets within the Caribbean where the work ethic is not exactly where we'd like for it to be. And we'd like to ensure that all our Caribbean colleagues, including those in Jamaica, have caught up and are at a really comfortable level that they can compete on the world stage. So the real reason why I went back was to see, how can I be transformational? How can I develop colleagues on the ground to the point where they are now evolving, they are now soaring, to the point where they can now compete within this global village in which we live. So that's why I did that. And that in itself was a high point, because I went on a mission. Because as far as I'm concerned, my career was behind me. And this is now me giving back. So to go back a bit, there were several high points, but I will always come back to when I was appointed head of cellular services and pretty much given a blank sheet by Mr. Hugh Cross, who is now Dr. Hugh Cross, to put this department together and to pretty much introduce cellular or mobile services to Jamaica. That was the biggest challenge I've ever had and the most rewarding job I've ever had. We went out and we were able to recruit young people, a number of them coming in for the first time into the workforce. We were focusing on customer services, so we felt that we're going to take people who are unspoiled and people who are, have this customer services credo, those who have it naturally, those who will learn it at the first time on this job. And we will put in our business, we'll start this business, we'll put in the necessary network, and we will get it running, and we'll introduce mobile services to Jamaica. And it went very, very well. I mean, in terms of the overall targets, in terms of the sheer numbers, we exceeded that in no time. I mean, what we did, we started service, I think if I recall correctly, we started in August of 1991. Although I would have been appointed in February of 1991. But we launched the service August 1991. And by the end of the year, we would have achieved the numbers we were anticipating in 18 months.
Wonderful.
And it just continued to be a very rewarding experience. Just a mixture of the people we were working with, the support we had from the overall company, including Mr. Cross, and just the reaction of the public to this new service, and the fact that we could be at the forefront of introducing mobile services to Jamaica.
Wonderful.
So that was very good. No, this was a purely Jamaican department. All my colleagues, all my responsibilities were within Jamaica. The next high point that I would consider is when I became head of or executive vice president for carrier services. No, carrier as opposed to carriers, carrier, which is our wholesale services. And this is when our competition was coming in. And our responsibility was towards that interconnection agreement throughout the Caribbean with different companies who were coming in to compete with cable and wireless. This was, I found, to be very, very exciting. Operated in a Chinese wall environment. I certainly got to learn a lot about telecoms regulations. This job caused me to end up in court a few times because of how heavily legalistic it was. I spent 2 days on the podium at the Royal Court of Justice in London in a dispute with another telecoms carrier. But it all went into, I consider it to be a good experience.
Yes.
There was another court case that I was involved here in Jamaica. But I was able to go across the Caribbean, starting with Jamaica, Barbados, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Cayman, and to have interconnection rolled out, liberalization rolled out, which in the end was good for the Caribbean countries involved. And certainly in the end it was good for cable and wireless also. So that was something where I was managing across multinational boundaries. I had people coming in from various, and not just Caribbean folks, but we had people from the UK, we had people from the US, Canada, coming in and being part of this team. So I had to manage within that environment. You had to manage across languages, different type of regulations in different countries. This is allowed here, but not allowed there. And it was all very exciting. And I found it to be quite rewarding. It involved a lot of travel, but it also enabled me to learn a lot more about our Caribbean neighbors. Today, I identify personally as a Caribbean.
Wonderful, wonderful. How did you find managing a multicultural group of persons across the different regions as you moved throughout the Caribbean?
So we are all different, but at the same time, there are so many similarities. So it comes back down to what are your corporate objectives and how am I aligned to those? Because we were one Caribbean company. And if I might be allowed to segue a little bit, within all of this, another high point was in 2008, I was given the task to co-lead what we call a Tiger team, which we branded as Savannah. I think it was about 8 of us that were chosen, and I was a leader. So we had 2 leaders to lead this team. Our remit was to look at the Caribbean organization, the entire Caribbean organization, and come up with a structure that best suits our purpose, best satisfy our customer needs, best for colleagues, best in terms of how we communicate with customers, best in terms of how we communicate with our governments, various governments, best in terms of how we communicate to our regulators, and how we satisfy our legal framework of operating, best in terms of how we do sales and marketing, best in terms of how we do billing. In other words, come up with a framework, a blueprint for the best Caribbean company, looking at all that we entail, the countries that we covered, the different systems that we had in place. And we delivered on this.
Wonderful.
The company was reorganized. And we were recognized for this. And that was because this is something that normally the company would have called in a very, very high price consultant to do, or consultants to do.
Yes.
And back in those days, they certainly would have gone outside of the Caribbean to source these consultants.
Yes.
They'd have gone back to the UK or the US or Canada.
Yes.
Well, here it is. We had a Caribbean team headed by 2 Caribbean nationals, including myself, and we delivered on that objective. In fact, it was supposed to be totally voluntary, and at the end, the company decided to reward us.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was that good.
Congratulations, and you kept foreign exchange in the region. That's wonderful,
Exactly.
Mr. Mac. That is wonderful. Mr. McNaughton, it has been such a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for this interview. We are grateful for the lessons that you have shared today. Lessons for management, lessons for organization, lessons for leadership, lessons for individuals who are coming from humble beginnings to recognize that they can achieve greatness. We thank you for the service that you have given to the Caribbean region through the various roles that you have played in this industry, the telecommunications and the petroleum industry. I pray that God will strengthen you so that you will continue to make valuable contributions, not just to Jamaica, but to the entire Caribbean region. Thank you so much. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless our beautiful Caribbean.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith. It was certainly a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Mr. Mac. Thank you.
Thank you.